Hey everyone, I'm out and about at the moment, traveling with a friend. She's just pulled her car up so she can go pick her son up from school, and so I thought while I'm here waiting, I'll make this video about Star Wars and more specifically about the unfinished episodes that we never got to see in Clone Wars. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I thought, after Disney cancelled the show to replace it with Rebels, and Rebels was okay, but I didn't like it anywhere near as much as I like Clone Wars. And I'd be lying if I were to say that I wasn't a little bit bitter about the fact that they cancelled the Clone Wars for Rebels. And as I stated, I liked Rebels in the same sense I also like potato chips. But if I'm eating some really nice cooked steak or bacon, and then I'm about 80% through, and then they decide to take that away and replace it with a bag of potato chips, notably I'm going to be upset. So when I heard that they just announced The Bad Batch, this new show that we're getting, I was hoping, oh, maybe this will be based during the Clone Wars era so that we can get some story arcs, that might be unfinished that they can somehow work into this. Then I found out, according to this video on IGN, keep in mind IGN aren't always the most reliable source of information. Okay, I've seen their reviews on games. It's like, oh, this game just barely made it through and didn't shit itself. Awesome, brilliant, game of the year, 10 out of 10. But what was stated on the video that I saw that was uploaded to IGN was that this Bad Batch upcoming series is going to be taking place after the events of Revenge of the Sith, about these special clone troopers that are now trying to figure out where they fit into the galaxy. That's basically the show in a nutshell. I'm sure there's going to be great story arcs, but at the moment that's all I and anyone else really knows about it, unless you're one of the creators of the show. And I started thinking, well, okay, damn. Because when Disney announced that they were bringing back the Clone Wars, I was hoping that we were going to be getting a lot more episodes and a lot more of those unfinished story arcs that I knew about that sadly we didn't get to see. So all those story arcs in the latest season of Clone Wars, albeit 3 of them, are somewhat tweaked from the original ideas they had. So I'll be honest, I actually never watched the footage of the original ideas for the Bad Batch. I only ever saw what they brought into Season 7. As for the episode where it reintroduces Ahsoka, where she's traveling around with the Latino sisters. Yeah, I said Latino, fucking sue me. The opening of that episode, from where she's on a speeder and she crashes it into the mechanic's shop, that was actually not something that was newly introduced, but originally she met this other guy who was a mechanic and a smuggler, and then they end up changing that character to one of the sisters. I forgot what the fuck their surname is, hence why I just said Latino sisters. Anyway, it's 2020, I'm sure I'll piss someone off by using that choice of words. And so that was a bit different to what we were originally supposed to get, because the man that she met, who was the mechanic slash smuggler, was meant to be somewhat of a love interest. And so now that, and the Siege of Mandalore was a bit different as well. Apparently, from what I was led to believe, Rex had removed his chip prior to Order 66 and faked Ahsoka's death or whatever. And I'm sure that story arc would have been written really well and that would have been a cool ending. However, the ending that we actually got, I actually think was a bit better. The fact that he didn't remove his chip and Ahsoka had to help him remove it as Order 66 was, in motion, was a bit more dramatic, and I actually really loved that ending. And so now I'm thinking, well, how is it that Disney now can, if they choose to let the writers give us those unfinished story arcs in film form? I know that some of them were turned into comic books and others were turned into novels, but come on. I would much prefer to see them in film. The vast majority of Clone Wars fans out there would much rather see them in film. Even those that are huge book nerds would still rather see the ones that were novelized in film. And so I had some ideas as to the way that they could possibly do this, and whether they'll do it or not is another story, but basically what they could do is take every single Ahsoka Tano story arc that was unfinished, and then make that at least 2 seasons. So season 1 taking place during the events of the Clone Wars. So I don't care what you can call it. You can call it Star Wars, the Ahsoka Tano Chronicles or the Ahsoka Tano Adventures or something like that, or Adventures Ahsoka Tano. I don't give a fuck what you call it, but make it about Ahsoka. Okay? Ahsoka is by far one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars history. No, so not just the Clone Wars, I'm talking like ever. So the fact that if you were to turn this into an actual TV series that's animated, following the events of all those unfinished story arcs, some of them were really awesome, by the way. I don't want to get into telling you what episodes we didn't get, just know that there are ones that we didn't get, and from what I know about them, it would be pretty awesome. So that's one way that you could do a story with Ahsoka, then making Season 2 take place after the events of Revenge of the Sith, because we don't really know what happened to her between, or a lot of what happened to her between the events of Part 3 and Rebels. So having a Season 2 showing what happened to her between that time period, I think would be really awesome. So the other unfinished story arcs, one of which was this little event that happened between Boba Fett and Cad Bane, and just from everything that I saw of it, there's no reason for me to believe that they couldn't work that story arc into the upcoming TV show The Bad Batch. I don't really believe that there's any reason as to why it specifically needs to take place before Order 66. I'm sure with the talented writers they got there, they could easily work that into The Bad Batch. Whether they will or not's another story, but I'd really love to see it because it was a showdown between Boba Fett, as he's now wearing that iconic armor for the first time. So it's a showdown between him and Cad Bane. And that iconic dint that you see in Boba Fett's helmet, we get to see that now. I never thought that I gave a shit about how the fuck he got that dint in the helmet. I just figured, okay, maybe he fell off something and landed, that part first on the ground. But as it turns out, that isn't the case. And the fact that they explained it in a way that I thought was really cool, made me actually care about that little dint in his helmet so much more. The main story arc I'm pissed off as all hell that we didn't get to see was one of Ventress, and she was one of my favorite characters because they introduced her as just being this other Sith, or whatever it is you want to call it. Technically, maybe she's not a Sith, but a dark side user, so I don't have time to split hairs. So we got to see her introduced in the Clone Wars, and as sort of a one-dimensional character, and then as the episodes progressed, we actually got to see a lot more waves of and layers of her character, and I really love the way that was progressed. And the last time we got to see her, though, was in Season 5, and I was like, well, what the fuck happened here? Did Ahsoka actually get a chance to speak to the Jedi Council about pardoning her war crimes? That was never explained until they turned it into a novel called Dark Disciple. And basically what happened is that the Jedi in the dark times that they were living in decided to, and I can't remember the name of this fucking Jedi, but he was introduced in the Clone Wars episodes when they had to go track down Zero after he escaped from prison. He was the black guy with dreadlocks, and there's nothing offensive about saying black guy with dreadlocks, okay? Calm down, all you fucking radicals. So whatever his name was, you know what, I remember, I can add subtitles. This is his name. They hired him to go track down Count Dooku and kill him so that they could essentially have an upper hand in the war. And he had to team up with Ventress in order to do so. But she said that, hey, in order to get, the upper hand on Dooku and to ultimately kill him, you need to channel energy from the dark side. So she ended up teaching him that. There's a lot more detail in what I'm mentioning here. I'm just going with the key points. He ends up falling in love with her, yada yada. There's going to be some spoilers here. If you don't want them ruined, watch another video. So there was a showdown between that man and Count Dooku, as Ventress was also in there, and Count Dooku used the power of the Force to use that electricity power that, they wield from their hands. Ventress jumps in the way of that blast, taking like a hit for this other Jedi, and Dooku escapes, and then Ventress ultimately dies as a result of, being electrocuted by the dark side power. And then the other Jedi ends up taking her back to, what was it, Dathomir, is it? The one where the females are? I can't remember which one was the one with the males and the females. Yeah, I sound like a real hardcore fan now, don't I? But anyway, whichever the place is where the Night Sisters are, he took her back there and buried her so that she could be buried with her kin. And I thought that was a really cool story arc. And from what I was told, it was meant to be stretched out over, I think it was 8 episodes. So what they could do with that one is actually just take all those episodes and combine them into a movie. That would be really great. And keep in mind, I'm obviously saying that all this stuff would be ultimately placed on the Disney Plus streaming service. So you would have all these ways that they could take these unfinished episodes and use them well, but I think the one that could make its own awesome animated standalone movie would be this one about Ventress, and they could just call it what they called the novel, just call it Star Wars Dark Disciple, lace all those episodes together, and then release it. I still think that they should stay true to the animation style of Clone Wars, but if they wanted to change it, at least do it in such a way where it's going to stay true to that particular theme. I don't want to see it animated the same way as they did Rebels, because Rebels, I didn't hate the animation style, but when I saw the characters from Clone Wars and the way that they looked in Rebels, I'm like, just no. You know, Rex just didn't quite work for me, and especially Ahsoka. Rex and Ahsoka, by the way, my 2 top favorite characters in Clone Wars. And the vibe that I got from Ahsoka, seeing her in Rebels, it just didn't quite look like Ahsoka. I know she's older, but even then, the way that they modeled the face, it looked more like if Ahsoka had an older sister. That's, to me, what I would envision her to look like. It didn't quite look like Ahsoka, so I was getting different vibes looking at that character the way she was animated in Rebels. And so, which reiterates my point. If you're going to do I live in hope here, of course, but if you are going to do a animated series based entirely on Ahsoka Tano and her unfinished story arcs, and maybe possibly introducing new ones, I do suggest staying true to the animated style of Clone Wars. Keep in mind, say what you want about that style, it was meant to look like a cross between anime and Thunderbirds, and to which I say nailed it, and it worked. That's what introduced Ahsoka to us. I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted because there's people walking around, and I like to keep my eye on, the shady people around this town. So if you're going to introduce, Ahsoka was introduced in Clone Wars, and so the animation style is what, we first saw her as. And so I say stay true to that particular style if you want to continue on her story arcs. As for Dark Disciple, if that's going to be made into its own movie, I've seen some really cool other styles presenting Ventress, one of which being the actual front cover of the novel. And if they were to animate it in a way like that, I think, a movie on Dark Disciple being animated on Disney's streaming service would be really cool. So, yeah, that's something that I would like to see, but I don't know. What are your ideas? The only other way that I can think of that they could explore these other unfinished story arcs would be if they did something like Forces of Destiny, and I know Forces of Destiny was just a series of skits consisting of about 1.5 minutes, 3 minutes long, around that time period, but they were just random little episodes scattered around all the timelines, from episode 1 and all the way up to, I think from memory it was around about episode 7, maybe. I can't remember at the top of my head, but maybe there was some things between 7 and 8, but anyway. So if they did something like that, I don't really know what they'd call the show, but if they were to make a show based on, whatever time period they wanted, then what I recommend is there's a show on Netflix called Love, Death and Robots, and basically what it is, it's a show that is just a series of little short films, but each one of them's animated differently. So some it looks very anime, others it looks like a cutscene in a PS4 era video game. And so it's really well done. And so if Star Wars were to do some kind of show like this, then episodes taking place in the Clone Wars era, they could animate that like the Clone Wars. Something else that takes place closer to the Rebels era, they can stay true to the way that Rebels was animated. And if they wanted to do something closer to the Resistance era, meaning the actual show called Star Wars Resistance, then they could stick to their Borderlands-style graphics. Or if you never played Borderlands, well then, if you played the Telltale games, the same style graphics, basically. And to a lesser extent, The Darkness 2. Good game, but come on, the graphics in the first Darkness game were better. But I digress, I'm not here to talk about games, I'm here to talk about Star Wars. The animated ones. That's basically all I've got as an idea. But anyway, the reason I bring this up is because I'm a diehard Clone Wars fan. I thought that that had some of the best storytelling. It was written by such a talented team, and so, like I said, the love, care, and heart that they poured into that show, I just thought it was a massive middle finger to the Clone Wars fans that Disney came along and decided, no, we're going to cancel the show for Rebels. I would have accepted Rebels more had they let the creators of Clone Wars actually finish the show properly, then move on to Rebels. And like I said, I didn't mind Rebels, I didn't love it, and I liked about 20% of it. And so I tried not to compare it to Clone Wars, but the fact that Clone Wars was literally cancelled just to make way for this show kind of gave me, I think, a very good reason and excuse to compare it. Not to mention the fact that they brought back some characters that were first introduced in Clone Wars into Rebels. So obviously Rex and Ahsoka, but also Hondo. And I really liked Hondo as a character. He wasn't one-dimensional. He was very much motivated by his way of thinking is, hey, what's the best route I can go here to get the most amount of money? And that would basically determine if he was going to be a threat or an ally or just neutral to a particular character. Because there's times where he was against Obi-Wan, there were times that he was working with him, and not just Obi-Wan, but Anakin and Ahsoka as well. I mean, I'm assuming you've seen every episode of the Clone Wars, so you should know what I'm talking about. And he seemed a bit dubbed down by the time he was introduced in Rebels, so, you know, that was a bit of a moment for me. But anyway, that moment where Ahsoka was fighting Darth Vader and realized he is in fact Anakin, okay, I'll give props for that. And every scene involving Darth Maul was really awesome in Rebels. So even the very quick fight scene between him and Obi-Wan, that was really cool. Something else I don't know if anyone even picked up on, but when, assuming you've seen Rebels, that fight scene with Maul and Obi-Wan, despite the fact that it was done in a quick time frame, like 3 moves and then the fight was over. When they were in their fighting stances, Obi-Wan, he took his iconic Ewan McGregor stance first, where this hand, sorry, realize how close the camera is, but basically one hand's pointing out and the lightsaber's like this, and then he transitioned into the more iconic Alec Guinness stance. And I'm like, that's cool, because, you know, if you're a nerd like me, you understand these fighting stances. Plus, I'm also a martial arts and self-defense instructor, and so I also know where a lot of these techniques come from in real-life martial arts and how they interlace them and intertwine them into the Star Wars universe. So, anywho, that's basically my thoughts, but tell me, I legitimately want to know, what you people out there, the fans of this show, I don't care if you're fans of Rebels or Star Wars, Clone Wars, or, you know, the novels, anything like that, or even if you hated some others, I legitimately want to know, if you did like Clone Wars, though, would you actually want to see these unfinished story arcs presented in the way that I suggested that Disney might be able to do it? You know, assuming they actually decide to take their heads out of their asses. I don't know what it is with Disney. I've got this love-hate relationship with them. I mean, they gave really great live-action spin-offs, albeit one at the moment, The Mandalorian, but for a series. The movies, I loved Rogue One, and I don't care what anyone says. I thought the movie Star Wars Solo, or whatever they called it, I think it was called Solo or Star Wars Story, but you know the one I'm talking about. That was really well done. I actually liked it, and I just think every critic took a very immature attitude when saying, oh, it's bad because of these reasons. And the reasons they had were just really pathetic. Oh, the guy they got to play Han Solo's shorter than Harrison Ford. Okay, next. Oh, well, there's a radical feminist robot. It was a robot that just happened to be female that was trying to fight for equality of other robots. How is that different to the plot of, like, Blade Runner or almost any other movie where, or video game where robots are trying to get, you know, the same rights that humans have? You know, that didn't make any sense to me. But anyway, all I know is that I watched the movie and I liked it. I didn't mind Star Wars 7, that was pretty good, and 8 and 9, not that much. And I'm like, how is it Disney approved a script for those movies, and they were, I'll just call a spade, they weren't great, okay? The special effects were good, storyline, heart-wise, yeah, not really. But Rogue One and Solo and Mandalorian, those are amazing. So I know Disney has the potential to hire good filmmakers to make great Star Wars stories. They just need to be sure to, you know, I don't know. They just have to do it right. That's my point. So I don't know what it is that they need to do to be able to not fuck this up, should they decide to continue on those Clone Wars episodes in whatever way they do it. But I don't think we'll ever see those story arcs in a show that's actually called Clone Wars. But let's just grant the proposition that maybe, at some point they will give us another season of Clone Wars, despite the fact that the one that was last released was called the final season. They could, because, you know, let's face it, the Clone Wars wasn't one for continuity. I mean, if you look at the episodes in chronological order, it's like a spilled bucket of fuck just everywhere. I mean, the first episode, if we're going chronologically, is Season 2, Episode 16. Anyway, there's a list online that shows you all the episodes in chronological order. I'll put it in the description, meaning I'll put the link to take you to that site in the description box, and you can check it out yourself if you want to. But if you have a plan on watching the Clone Wars episodes again to catch up, but you want to see it in the proper chronological order of timeline, then I recommend this is the definitive way to watch that show. So, like I said, should they ever decide to continue on the Clone Wars as a proper Clone Wars season, they wouldn't be able to call it the final season, obviously, but they could call it the, I don't know, the unfinished arcs or the lost episodes part 2 or something. You know, who knows? But anyway, all I know is that as a diehard Clone Wars fan who was bitter about the fact that the show got cancelled for just seemingly petty reasons, I would just want to see those unfinished story arcs in animated form. So there's a lot of ways they can go about it, but, you know, tell me, you know, all the Clone Wars fans out there who want to see these unfinished episodes, let me know in the comments what it is that you would actually like to see. What do you think would be the best route, and what do you think is the most possible route? Do you think Disney will ever do it? I don't know, but all I know is that, yeah. I've technically had years to grieve over the fact that this show was cancelled, and I haven't gone through all those stages of grieving yet. I'm still stuck on anger, so I'm trying to remain calm in this video, but yeah, I could make this video where I'm yelling and ranting a lot, but I decided, no, I'll keep it a little bit civil. If Obi-Wan were to watch this video, he'd be like, so uncivilized. Alright, well, that's basically all I wanted to talk about, and so I'll turn the camera off now. I'll let you guys get back to what you're doing. Thank you for watching. Go watch some films, and because this is a Star Wars video and I don't get a chance to say this in my regular daily life, I have to say it now. May the Force be with you.